Good day. This is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you for Reason to Resist from Kalamata, Greece on May 20th, 2025. And I'm very pleased to be joined again by our good friend and frequent guest, Laith Marouf, who's coming to us from Beirut. Laith is, as I've said many times, an extraordinary geopolitical analyst, an outstanding resistance journalist, and the executive director of Free Palestine TV, which will I'm sure have an opportunity to talk about a little bit towards the end of the interview. Thank you again for joining me, Laith.
Great to be with you, Dimitri.
So, Laith, I'd like to begin by asking you about two remarkable statements. I at least regard them as remarkable, that were issued yesterday by certain Western governments. So the first of them was issued by the governments of France, Canada, and the UK. And in part, it stated as follows. The Israeli government's denial of essential humanitarian assistance to the civilian population is unacceptable and risks breaching international humanitarian law. We condemn the abhorrent language used recently by members of the Israeli government, threatening that in their despair at the destruction of Gaza, civilians will start to relocate. Permanent forced displacement is a breach of international humanitarian law. Israel suffered a heinous attack on October 7th. We have always supported Israel's right to defend Israelis against terrorism, but this escalation is wholly disproportionate. We will not stand by while the Netanyahu government pursues these egregious actions. If Israel does not cease the renewed military offensive and lift its restrictions on humanitarian aid, we will take further concrete actions in response. And what I personally think is the most remarkable part of the statement is this. We oppose any attempt to expand settlements in the West Bank. Israel must halt settlements which are illegal and undermine the viability of a Palestinian state and the security of both Israelis and Palestinians. We will not hesitate to take further action, including targeted sanctions. So that's the first statement, Laith. The second statement was issued by the foreign ministers of about 23 Western countries and the EU. Those Western countries included Canada, France, the UK, Germany, and Japan. It did not disgracefully include the government of the country in which I'm currently situated. Kyriakos Mitsotakis, the right-wing prime minister of Greece, has been a shameless ally of Israel throughout this genocide. In any event, here's what this statement had to say, in part. Whilst we acknowledge indications of a limited restart of aid, Israel blocked humanitarian aid entering Gaza for over 2 months. Food, medicines, and essential supplies are exhausted. The population faces starvation. Gaza's people must receive the aid they desperately need. As humanitarian donors, we have two straightforward messages for the government of Israel. Allow a full resumption of aid into Gaza immediately and enable the UN and humanitarian organizations to work independently and impartially to save lives, reduce suffering, and maintain dignity. We remain committed to meeting the acute needs we see in Gaza. We also reiterate our firm message that Hamas must immediately release all remaining hostages and allow humanitarian assistance to be distributed without interference. It is our firm conviction that an immediate return to a ceasefire and working towards the implementation of a two-state solution are the only way to bring peace and security to Israelis and Palestinians and ensure long-term stability for the whole region. Close quote. Now, Laith, what struck me in particular about these statements is that for the first time, and I'm referring especially to the one from Canada, France, and the UK, at least this is the first time in the history of Israel, as far as I am aware, these three governments have explicitly threatened Israel with targeted sanctions. I don't recall ever having seen that before. Now, I just want to say before I ask you for your reaction, Laith, it's important, I think, for this to be said. Even if these governments were to implement the harshest sanctions their minds can devise on Israel today, it is my firm opinion as a lawyer that every one of the leaders of these countries should be frog-marched off to The Hague and tried for aiding and abetting a genocide. And if found guilty in accordance with due process, they should pass the rest of their decrepit, stinking lives rotting in a jail cell at The Hague. That's my opinion as a lawyer. But I'm nonetheless struck by this language, and I'm curious what you make of it. Does this is this just an elevation in rhetoric, or do you think something is changing in the Western discourse?
Well, obviously, it's too little, too late. That's my first thought, and it is follows in the tradition of what these governments have been doing for more than 30 years since the Oslo agreements beginning, meaning that the reality on the ground is too far, always too far past the rhetoric that these capitals put forward, these colonial capitals, meaning they know it's impossible, it's already past that stage, and therefore they take that position. For instance, starting with this two-state solution. When the Oslo, theatrics were started by the West, already there was hundreds of thousands of colonists inside the West Bank, inside Gaza, that were impossible to take out. There was already a merging of the two populations geographically. There's no way to create two states. Therefore, these colonial powers talk about two states. They know it's not going to happen. Similarly, right now, we are entering the final solution phase of what's happening in Gaza, meaning we're watching as the Zionist colony is building extermination camps in the Rafah region and is now declared almost 80% of the Gaza Strip as a kill zone, and is already in starvation of the population for weeks, almost months. So what does this mean? Talk about sanctions right now is not going to stop the final solution. The Palestinians will be exterminated while these capitals debate, and then it will be too late. And those same capitals, when it was possible, those same colonial capitals, when at that moment it was possible to stop the genocide from unfolding, intervened on the side of the Zionist colony, fully aided it financially and militarily, and rounded up the largest military buildup since World War II, including the largest flotilla of warships since World War II, on the shores of Palestine to stop anyone from intervening to stop the unfolding of this genocide. So now we're at the final solution. And instead of these capitals intervening directly, not by only cutting their weapons supply, the weapons supply is already delivered. There's now a pileup since the coming of Trump of weapons in the warehouses of the Israeli military to genocide all the Arabic people, 600 million of them, not only the Palestinians of Gaza. Okay, it's too late. Now is the talk that is effective is for these capitals to say we're declaring war on Gaza, on the Zionist colony, not on Gaza, as they have for the last 20 months. But this is we are definitely in the final stage of this genocide. It's too little, too late.
I'm going to say something I've never said before. First of all, I remain fully committed to the notion of a trial conducted in accordance with due process. I think that that's precisely how every one of these culprits whom you have identified should be dealt with. They should be given an opportunity to defend themselves. I don't know what they would say in their defense. Can't imagine anything plausible, remotely credible they could say in their defense, but they should have that opportunity with able counsel representing them. And if they're found guilty, and this is the part I've never said before, I've always been against capital punishment, Laith, for a variety of reasons. But in the case of aiding and abetting a genocide, when the evidence is absolutely overwhelming and there's really no possibility of a wrongful conviction, because the whole world has been watching for 19 months that Western leaders and these editors of these corporations, these so-called media corporations, have been doing everything possible to enable and encourage and fuel this genocide. The evidence is so overwhelming that I don't think there is any prospect of a wrongful conviction, frankly. And if you're going to, deal with the Nazis who were convicted at Nuremberg in terms of capital punishment, why should these scoundrels and psychotic bastards get any better treatment? I can't, in my own mind, come up with a reason. In any case, I hope you're not saying, because this isn't my view, but I hope you're not saying that if this is what you believe, this is what you believe, and of course, we want to hear your honest opinion. But I don't believe that the Palestinian people are going to be wiped out. They're going to kill a lot more people the way things are going. And this is enraging, of course. But I don't think they're going to be able to achieve their goals. What do you think?
Let's be very frank here. Currently, the only people that are defending the Palestinians militarily are the Yemenis. And Yemen's military intervention is not enough to stop the genocide. It's not enough to defeat the Zionist colony. And the Palestinians will resist in Gaza to the last man, woman, child. But if no one intervenes directly right now, militarily, the Palestinians in Gaza will be exterminated. There's not going to be a mass expulsion, transfer, ethnic cleansing. That's never going to happen. What's going to happen, as we see, is the Israelis openly are declaring they're going to kill every Palestinian and that nobody will stop them. This is the words of Smotrich. Okay. And it's going to happen. This doesn't mean that they will be able to kill all the Palestinians in the West Bank or inside 48, or that this will be the end of this war, or that Palestinians will be completely eradicated. But those in Gaza right now, as we are speaking, are at the edge of full extermination. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so anyone that wants to stop this from happening needs to take serious physical action to get in the way of this. In the next week, 2, 3 months, if nothing happens, there will be no more Palestinians left in Gaza in a month.
Mm-hmm. Well, for what it's worth, my view is that we're in the early stages of an uprising. I think one of the reasons why, and perhaps the most important reason why they put this statement out and finally threatened sanctions, is because they're afraid. I think the leaders of the West are afraid. I think they're seeing a tremendous amount of anger. The anger is building. You're seeing this. I understand there was a senatorial delegation that went to Netanyahu and said to him, we just can't accept you're starving the children of Gaza. We can't accept that. This is beyond the pale. You have to stop. And I think within Israel, there is tremendous unrest. Not that, a majority of the population or even a substantial majority cares about Palestinians, but they want an end to the war. They're sick of it. And based on what I can see, you send a lot of ground forces into Gaza, they're going to suffer serious casualties. They're going to inflict a lot more than they suffer. But the Israel genocide forces cannot accomplish that goal without losing a lot of soldiers, in my opinion. That's just going to heighten the anger within Israel. And then you have the pressure point, the economic pressure points, and the resistance outside of Israel. And I think all of these forces together perhaps I'm being naive and optimistic unduly, but I think all of these forces together are going to bring this monster to its knees, and I think we're seeing its collapse before our very eyes. But of course, I could be wrong.
Look,
Uh, I,
I
I
am.
don't. I just want to say I don't doubt for one second, Laith, their determination to do it and their willingness to do it. What I doubt is whether the world will ultimately allow them to do it. We're
Well,
going to
look,
find.
I want to be very clear here. I don't mean that the Palestinians will not put up a fight and or this is the end of the resistance in Gaza. But look, right now there is at least 2,500 Indian mercenaries, Hindu fascists on the ground in Gaza. This is above and beyond the American special forces that are entering right now, camouflaged as delivery of aid by Trump, that are going to be in control of the extermination camps that are being built in the Rafah region. Okay, and so because all the mercenary and intelligence and military of the West right now is free because it doesn't have a battle in Syria, it doesn't have a battle in Iraq, it doesn't have a battle in Lebanon, it doesn't have even a battle in Yemen. They have concentrated all their efforts. This letter that just came out by all these presidents and prime ministers is actually a cover for the direct participation of their special forces on the ground in the extermination of the Palestinians in Gaza. So there will be hundreds, if not thousands, and there have already been tens of thousands of Western and mercenaries and Indians and Africans and so on that have been bought and thrown into the front in Gaza that died, that are unaccounted for. You see, some of your viewers may remember that last year during the war, Hamas released a video of their engagement against invading troops inside a tunnel, and them killing and dragging one of those soldiers wearing Israeli fatigues that wasn't Israeli, that was Indian. Okay, so this is the reality on the ground. The Israeli soldiers, although we know that at least 15,000 Israeli soldiers died in the front in Gaza and in Lebanon, they are still like the third line. There's more disposable foreign mercenaries that are in the front lines. There's a lot of special forces from other countries that are there dying in the service of Jewish white supremacy, right, that are unaccounted for. And that means there's a tsunami of mercenaries that eventually, without the military intervention of the axis of resistance directly and or other forces into stopping this genocide, eventually they will win.
Well, we'll have to see. I remain convinced that the genocidal entity will not achieve its goals in Gaza and certainly not in the region as a whole.
And finally, I want to say one thing. I am with you 100% that this is the end of the Zionist colony. There's no going back. There's no return from what just happened and what is unfolding. The problem we are facing is how it's going to end. On the one hand, we see how the West put all its power and is still putting all its power to defeat the axis of resistance and even threaten Iran, as we're seeing, to enable the genocide. On the other, as you mentioned, the vast majority of the population in the imperial domains are against this genocide, are increasingly becoming not only anti-Zionist, but militant. Okay. So the question is, which one is going to come to fruition its efforts, these two, forces that are dragging within the Western societies? Is it going to be the military force of imperialism, or is it going to be the militancy of the populace in those imperial domains that is going to come to fruition faster? You see, I understand there's a lot of anger, but is this anger translating into direct action that threatens and forces the elite in the imperial domains to retreat from their military intervention? I am not sure about that. Up until now, it doesn't seem like it.
Well, the good news, if there's any to be found, is that the answer to your question depends largely upon us. If we escalate rapidly enough and harshly enough, we can achieve that goal before the genocidal entity achieves its goals, but we shall see. So, Laith, let me move on to some other developments in the region. During the past 2 weeks, there's been a lot of chatter in the Western press about a so-called rupture between Trump and Netanyahu. And people have trotted out a lot of arguments, including the alternative media. I'm not going to, name names, but I'm sure if you watch the anti-imperialist, platforms, the main ones, in the English language, you've heard a lot of talk about this supposed rupture. And the two pieces of evidence that get referred to most often, and the ones that I personally find most significant, although I don't agree for 1 second that there's any kind of a meaningful rupture. Just to cut to the chase, my view is there ain't no rupture. But I want to put to you what I think are the two most powerful pieces of evidence in support of that argument. First, Trump agreed to stop attacking Yemen if Ansar Allah stopped attacking U.S. ships, but apparently Trump did not require Ansar Allah to stop attacking Israel. And in fact, Ansar Allah has continued to attack the genocidal entity since the U.S. stopped bombing Yemen. And the second piece of evidence is that Trump took a major trip to West Asia without visiting Israel. Now, what do you make of the claims that there's some kind of a rupture between Trump and Netanyahu?
I mean, look, it's definitely good theatrics. We can see how even seasoned analysts are getting dragged into this theatrics and are actually believing it. But the record, let's start from your last question there about the visiting the Gulf despots, vassals, but not visiting the Zionist colony. Well, the answer is very simple. I mean, the Zionist colony is inside the White House. He doesn't need to go to Netanyahu and Tel Aviv to get what they want. They're inside in the bedroom actually with him, in between him and Melania. So that's clearly all just for public consumption of the two markets that Trump is now having to have some more effect on. One is the MAGA people that have been watching Trump being dragged like on a leash by Netanyahu, and all the talk about influence and deep state and what's his name, all the pedophilia stuff and all of that he promised to release, and the JFK files and all of that being dumped, all those promises at the feet of the Zionists have really shaken the trust of the MAGA crowd with Trump. So now he had to play this theatric that, no, I'm the master, it's not Netanyahu. The empire is governed from Washington, not from Tel Aviv. And the other crowd is the population in the Arabic Gulf region and the Arabic population in general, specifically since the defeat and capture of Damascus, Syria, and the defeat, what we can argue as is the defeat of Hezbollah in Lebanon, which has left a space, for decades, the Gulf monarchies in their propaganda were saying that Syria is defending Israel, protecting Israel from actually being taken out by these Wahhabi death squads that are funded by the Gulf monarchies. And now there is no Bashar al-Assad. There's no Ba'ath Party in Syria. Syria has fallen. There is no Hezbollah defending the Palestinians. That the people were saying is making it worse, that Hezbollah is doing what it's doing. And still, the genocide is actually accelerating. So how can you distract the Arabic Sunni population who are now finding themselves that they have been fooled? How can you do this? Well, you show by the supposed favor that Trump has to the Gulf monarchs over the Zionists because of their money. That's another propaganda point that these liberal vassals in the Arabic world were pumping in the Arabic population, that if only we have an Arab lobby, if only we can, do what the Zionists do, act like them, this is the way the system works. We can buy politicians like the Zionists, and you'll see how our money will have favor. This is what they have been telling anybody who's revolutionary in the region for decades. And now they have to show that actually their money is having an effect. But the only thing that they can play out is this visit, and nothing in return. No end of genocide of the Palestinians, no stopping of the war.
So let's talk about this circus of a visit. On May 16th, the White House issued a statement claiming that during Trump's trip, and I just have to say, Laith, I'm sure you agree, this had to be the most unseemly spectacle I've ever seen in my entire life, that these Arab autocrats, who themselves are guilty of the most heinous crimes, including crimes against humanity in Yemen, giving one ovation after another to a president who was in the process of exterminating Palestinian Arab civilian population in Gaza. I was speechless, but not surprised, frankly, because the people who were giving those ovations to Trump proved long ago that they are the lowest of the low, absolute scum of humanity. In any case, Trump puts out a statement on May 16th. He says he has secured $2 trillion in quote unquote great deals for the United States. And according to the White House, the deals included a $600 billion investment commitment from Saudi Arabia, a $1.2 trillion economic exchange agreement with tiny little Qatar, and a $244 billion in U.S. Qatar commercial and defense deals. So you add that up, and that's like $1.45 trillion just involving Qatar. And finally, $200 billion in U.S. United Arab Emirates commercial deals. Maybe there's contractual documentation out there somewhere they've published that I haven't seen, but I'm not aware of any legally binding commitment that has been evidenced in writing. I certainly haven't seen anything like that to back up these extravagant claims. What do you make of this, Laith? Is this more or less true that these vicious, monstrous US-backed autocracies are showering, $2 trillion of wealth upon the United States?
This is another one of those theatrics that are laughable, because let's be very honest, these ruling families in the Gulf states are handpicked by the British. They're like inbred, I don't want to say the R word there, but I almost did. They're inbred, stupid people that are just there as a show. And their money is already, all of their money is in American and British banks specifically. And every American president has done anything they wanted to do with that money. And these Gulf monarchs get a small percentage of this money to keep their very low populations, except Saudi, their almost non-existent population, kept happy with this very small percentage of the huge loot of oil and gas. And what we saw of Trump saying that he got this money and that money from all of these Gulf states, he's just pretending that he just got it. They are pretending that they're giving it to him. It's already in his pocket. It's already in the American reserves. Okay. And so this is just another show, again, towards those two camps that we were talking about, the MAGA camp and the Arab Sunni, specifically Gulf camp, to make them feel that there is something really happening, some favor, some change. Politics have effect. The way that Trump is governing is different than the way that Biden is governing. They both got the money in the bank. That's actually what's been keeping American economy and British economy going for the last 60 years, more specifically the last 30 years. American economy wouldn't have survived without this money. That is black money that is funding every war that America is conducting, not only against the Arabs themselves. All these states have been footing the bill for the genocide of the Palestinians. Again, they don't have a choice. It's not like they're like, hey, boss, you can take another 100 million to kill more Palestinians. He already is taking that money. But this money is also actually, supporting and funding every intervention that the United States and the empire as a whole is conducting everywhere in the globe. Unaccounted for money. People talk about the budget of the Pentagon, nobody knowing where the money is. Well, tell me where the money is of the Arab Gulf oil for the last 100 years.
One of the more sickening scenes I forced myself to watch all of Trump's speech in Saudi Arabia before his adoring little vassal fans. And it was when Trump announced that he was lifting sanctions on Syria. And then, the Saudi autocrat clasped his breast as though he cares so deeply for the Syrian people. And he was so grateful to Trump for answering his call, his merciful call to allow the Syrian people to finally be liberated from those sanctions. I'm just going to show right now that little clip in case people haven't seen it, so you get a sense of the true distaste of the whole thing. Here it is.
Which has seen so much misery and death. There is a new government that will hopefully succeed in stabilizing the country and keeping peace. That's what we want to see in Syria. They've had their share of travesty, war, killing, many years. That's why my administration has already taken the first steps toward restoring normal relations between the United States and Syria for the first time in more than a decade. And I'm very pleased to announce that Secretary Marco Rubio will be meeting with the new Syrian foreign minister in Turkey later this week. And very importantly, after discussing the situation in Syria with the Crown Prince, your Crown Prince, and also with President Erdogan of Turkey, who called me the other day and asked for a very similar thing, among others, and friends of mine, people that I have a lot of respect for in the Middle East. I will be ordering the cessation of sanctions against Syria in order to give them a chance at greatness.
So subsequent to this, Trump, we understand, had a meeting with al-Jolani, the so-called president of Syria, who earlier this year had a $10 million CIA bounty on his head. What do you make of this vow by Trump to lift the sanctions on Syria? Do you think it's real, first of all? Secondly, why do you think he did it if it is real? And thirdly, what do you think Israel thinks of all of this?
Well, I just want to say, as a Syrian, that I'm against any sanctions anywhere. And because of what I saw, of course, how sanctions destroyed the livelihoods of normal Syrians, I would say that lifting sanctions, even with a ISIS government in Damascus, is a just thing, because sanctions are illegal, immoral war crimes. Now, having said that, lifting sanctions from Syria is not going to change the actual reality for people on the ground. What it's going to do is just accelerate the looting of Syrian resources. Okay, and as we saw, al-Jolani have put up every government institution or corporation for sale. And for people that don't know, Syria has a huge reserve of oil and gas on its shore that it hasn't been allowed to develop since its discovery. It's the biggest reserve of oil and gas in the Eastern Mediterranean. Even the Russians didn't want Syria to be allowed to extract that oil and gas. So we'll see American corporations and Western corporations and probably Israelis looting this gas momentarily, and Turkey too. There's also a huge reserve of cobalt that Syria wasn't allowed to, again, extract over the last 15 years. And so the wheat, the cement, the cotton, all the archaeological sites that are going to be looted, all of this is going to open up the vast looting of Syria. And Israel is involved in this. Anyone that thinks that ISIS, al-Jolani, and Israel are enemies is a fool. Look at what just happened over the last 2 days. The Israelis received the body of Eli Cohen, the Mossad agent, Arabized Mossad agent that lived in Egypt and Syria for decades and infiltrated the Syrian government and the Syrian Ministry of Defense in the 1960s. And his vast archive, as well as the bodies of Israeli soldier that was killed in the battle of in 1982 on the main highway between Damascus and Beirut, the crucial battle that ended the advancement of Israeli troops into Lebanon. So al-Jolani is giving Israel everything it wants. Today I was looking at a video of a mainstream Israeli television station. I think it was Channel 12 or something. And the reporter is in the heart of Damascus, broadcasting live. And was in the Marjah Square where Eli Cohen was hung after being captured by the Syrian government. And so clearly, these are not enemies. This is all, again, theatrics. These are all tools of the imperial domination of our people here.
So lastly, Laith, I'd like to ask you about the nuclear negotiations with Iran. The University of Maryland just published a poll which found that 69% of respondents support a negotiated agreement to limit Iran's nuclear activities with accompanying international monitoring. Even Republicans, 64%, favored a negotiated resolution over military action. A mere 14% of respondents preferred military action over a negotiated resolution. At the same time, more than 200 congressional Republicans have written to Trump to demand the complete dismantlement of Iran's nuclear enrichment capability. The letter was signed by every Republican senator except Rand Paul and 177 Republican members of the House of Representatives. And, as you probably know, I just completed a trip to Iran, which included a lengthy meeting with the spokesperson of the Iranian Atomic Energy Organization. And everything that I heard and saw, including from this gentleman, I've issued a report about this, has convinced me that Iran is not going to give up its enrichment capability. It has said this is absolutely non-negotiable. In fact, the Iranian foreign minister repeated this just a few days ago after the most recent round of negotiations. And so it seems as though I would just be shocked if Iran said, we're giving up enrichment altogether. I think Iran would accept significant restraints like they did under the JCPOA on the level of enrichment. For some period of time, they would accept that, not in perpetuity. But something that's radically different from the JCPOA, I just don't think that's in the cards. So Trump, it appears, is going to have to choose between all those Republicans who are demanding something that Iran will not agree to. And they presumably understand this. Iran's been very clear. And American public opinion, which is overwhelmingly supportive of a negotiated resolution. And the other thing I want to say before I ask you where you think all of this is heading is, if I were in Iran's situation, and I learned of those letters from Senate Republicans in particular, but also from the congressional Republicans, I would say even if Trump himself is willing to do a deal that we can live with, the deal isn't worth toilet paper, because the U.S. Constitution requires treaties to be the president can make treaties, but they have to be done with the advice and consent of the Senate. And I can't imagine that if all but one Republican senator is opposed to a deal that allows Iran to enrich at all. And surely you're going to find at least a few Democrats who are such warmongers that they're going to join with those Republicans, then the Senate won't consent to this deal. So if I'm in Iran's situation, I'm looking at this, I'm going, why should we make any concessions at all? Because this deal is probably doomed to begin with. So where do you think all of this is heading, Laith? I've always been of the view that we're heading to war. But a lot of people out there seem convinced that Trump is not going to go down that path.
Yeah, look, the experiment with the American engagement against Yemen has actually made it less likely that there is going to be a direct war between Iran and the United States. And I say this, I know you mentioned this in the last two questions ago, and I kind of didn't answer it fully there. The United States only used its aircraft carriers and the Diego Garcia island chain to attack Yemen because, although it has the largest airfield in the world in the Al Udeid, Qatar, didn't want to use its air bases in the Gulf states to attack Yemen because it was worried about what's going to happen to all these glass towers when Yemen retaliates, and the oil and gas fields. So it brought in these nuclear-powered aircraft carriers to project power from there and put in the B-1s and B-52s in Diego Garcia to bombard Yemen, and it almost lost aircraft carriers that are nuclear powered again, that if they would have sunk or blown up, would have created a nuclear, nuclear pollution field, right? And we don't know, this would have been the first nuclear powered aircraft carriers to ever been hit or to sink, okay? So the defeat, the inability of the United States to project power from its aircraft carriers, and it's the price being too high to use the airfields in the region against Yemen means that this is also the true for any engagement between the United States and Iran. The US will only be able to use airfields that are not in the region to attack Iran so as to keep its Gulf vassals safe, right? And this limits its ability to project power, and therefore it's not going to happen. Okay, so it's not going to happen. What does this mean? Does that mean the United States and Israel are going to just let Iran survive? No, they will be engaged in espionage, special forces-ish things, assassinations, blowing up and spiking equipment during the transfers in the supply chain, as they did with the pagers and the walkie-talkies in Lebanon. There will be continued ISIS, Al Qaeda attacks in Iran and increases of them. There'll be, as we see, fires on the side on Pakistan with India and Afghanistan issues. So there's multiple options for the United States to continue just ruining the life of Iranians and limiting the ability of Iran to engage in its region, let alone on a global scale. And the biggest problem that Iran has, and this is a problem that every nation should understand, is that it's now approaching the third generation after the Islamic Revolution in 1979. And the curse of the third generation of any state is the biggest test, okay, for a nation. The third generation, if it doesn't see during its lifetime a advancement of its livelihood and living conditions, this is when states start having problems, as we saw with the Arab quote-unquote spring, the Arab autumn, with the inability of the Arabic republics to show the third generation that they was worth, all the anti-colonial movement was worth something, right? The third generation hasn't lived the problems pre-revolution. They don't know it. And you can't convince them by simply referring to 2 generations ago, the colonial problem. So now that's what Israel and the United States are doing. They're going to buy their time for another 10 years before those demonstrations that we saw a few years ago in Iran. They didn't succeed because it was demonstrations of the second generation. They're still the first generation of the revolution, that is the vast majority of adults that understand how it was living under the Shah and British rule. But now, if there's demonstrations in 10 years from now, if Iran hasn't achieved a new success in its revolutionary path, this is where things start deteriorating.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, for what it's worth, I was only there for a week, but I was struck by the level of calm and order and how well ensconced that calm and order seemed, even though there were virtually no police officers anywhere that I could see, certainly none that were uniformed. I saw a total of 5 traffic cops walking all over that city, and they weren't even carrying handguns. So somehow, without a visible and massive police presence, it's a very calm and orderly society. People were going about their business, and I didn't see any really strong evidence of economic hardship. I'm sure there's a good deal of economic hardship in the country, but I see far worse evidence of economic hardship walking around just about any major Western city. For what it's worth, again, this was only 7 days, and I never left the city of Tehran. But I agree with you. History does suggest that as memories fade in subsequent generations, of the underlying injustices that brought about a revolution, those younger generations become more and more susceptible to Western propaganda. And there's no question that the West is doing all that it can to propagandize the Iranian population. I learned when I was down there that BBC has a channel in Farsi, so that they can communicate their outrageous lies to the people of Iran directly. And a lot of people do access BBC. In any case, Laith, it's always a pleasure talking to you. Our conversation today was darker than I think normally is the case, for understandable reasons. We are about to find out which of us is, I think, correct about the ultimate fate of the people of Gaza. And for the time being, we're signing off. Laith is coming to you from Beirut. I'm coming to you from Kalamata. And actually, before I go, I forgot, Laith, please tell us where people can support the excellent work that Free Palestine TV is doing.
Yeah, you can go to our website, freepalestine.video, to donate and to watch the content. We're producing almost daily reports from the field here in Lebanon. And, it's all in English. There's nobody else producing this content. And we're 100% donation driven. Our viewers are only source of income. We're not associated with any NGOs or governments, and we need everybody's help for us to continue producing this content.
Thank you very much. We're signing off for now.
See you soon.